In the far reaches of northern Canada, beyond the last traces of civilization, lies a land of endless white, a place where the cold is alive, the stars burn brighter than anywhere else, and the nights last 4 weeks. It was there, in the winter of 1930, that a mystery began, one that still haunts the frozen north to this very day. A seasoned fur trapper named Joe Labelle was traveling through the wilderness toward a small Inuit fishing village near Lake Anjikuni, a settlement he had visited many times before. He knew the people there well, kind, hard-working families who welcomed travelers with warm fires and hot tea. Their laughter, he once said, was enough to make the Arctic feel alive. But as Joe approached the village that evening, something felt wrong. The air carried no sound, no chatter, no dogs barking, not even the crackle of firewood. The wind whistled softly, but beneath it was only silence. When he reached the first igloo-shaped hut, the doorway stood open, swaying in the breeze. He called out. No answer. Inside, the fire had long burned out, its ashes cold and grey. Pots of stew still sat beside it, frozen in place. Blankets and tools were neatly arranged, untouched, as if their owners had stepped out for just a moment and never returned. Joe moved from one dwelling to the next, 10 huts, maybe more, and each one was the same. Beds were made, weapons were stored, food hung from drying racks. It was as though life itself had paused mid-breath. Then came the most haunting discovery of all, the sled dogs, still tied near their posts, lying motionless in the snow. They had not broken free, not wandered off, they had simply stopped living. There were no footprints leading away from the village, no drag marks, no signs of a struggle. Every clue pointed to one impossible conclusion, that an entire community of men, women, and children had simply vanished into the Arctic air. Panicked and deeply unsettled, Joe Labelle left the ghostly settlement and began the long, freezing trek through the wilderness to the nearest telegraph station. The journey took him nearly 20 miles through the snow, every shadow behind him feeling closer than the last. When he arrived, frostbitten and shaking, he sent a message to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, describing what he had found. The message was short, but it said everything. Something terrible has happened at Lake Anjikuni. The people are gone. Within hours, the Mounties organized a rescue and investigation team, but when they arrived at the village days later, what they found would make the mystery even deeper and far more disturbing.
When word reached the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, a full expedition was quickly organized. A group of seasoned officers, trackers, and native guides set off across the frozen wilderness, determined to find out what had happened at the mysterious village on the shores of Lake Anjikuni. It took days of grueling travel through waist-deep snow and temperatures that could freeze exposed skin in seconds. The group followed Joe Labelle's trail through the icy tundra, every step weighed down by uncertainty and dread. Finally, in the early hours of morning, they reached the settlement. The moment they stepped into the clearing, silence fell over the entire team. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. What they saw was exactly as Joe had described. Huts buried in snow, empty and untouched. Fires had long gone out, pots of food were frozen, and fishing gear hung neatly along the walls. The villagers' kayaks and tools were still there. Nothing had been stolen or moved. The Mounties moved cautiously, documenting every small detail. They found no footprints, no trails, no drag marks, no sign that anyone or anything had left the area. Then they came upon something that made the already strange scene far darker. Near the edge of the village was the community's burial ground. The snow had been disturbed, and several graves had been opened. Inside, there were no remains, no signs of digging tools, no evidence of wild animals, just gaping holes filled with snow. The men stood frozen in disbelief. No words were spoken for a long time. One of the Inuit guides crossed himself and muttered a quiet prayer. He said this place was touched by bad spirits, something ancient that roamed the skies during the long northern nights. Then, just as the sun began to dip behind the horizon, one of the officers pointed toward the distance. High above the frozen lake, a blue light shimmered against the darkening sky. It pulsed softly, moved slowly, not like an airplane or meteor, and then hovered motionless. For several long seconds, the men watched in silence. The light shifted color from pale blue to green, before fading completely into the horizon. No sound, no explosion, just disappearance. Later, when the team wrote their official report, none of them included what they'd seen in the sky. The entry was brief, almost clinical. It read, "The inhabitants appeared to have departed under unknown circumstances, but among the men, whispers spread. They spoke of the lights, of the graves, of the unbearable quiet that seemed to hang over the place." In the following days, the Mounties expanded their search, trekking miles in every direction, scanning the frozen lakes and forest edges for any sign of life. They found nothing. No footprints, no sled trails, no discarded tools, just the wind and the silence of a world that had lost its people. And in that silence, the legend of Anjikuni village was born, a mystery so deep that even time itself seemed unable to bury
Weeks
it.
turned into months, and the story of the vanished village spread far beyond the Arctic. What had begun as a chilling discovery soon became one of the most baffling mysteries in Canadian history. Every theory, every rumor, tried to make sense of what seemed impossible. How could an entire community simply disappear without a trace? The first theory was the simplest, that the villagers had migrated south to escape hunger or brutal weather. But that theory fell apart quickly. No one in the north left home in the heart of winter. The Inuit people of that region were skilled survivalists. They would have packed sleds, taken food, tools, dogs, and their belongings. Instead, everything had been left behind. The second theory came from scientists and skeptics. Perhaps something in nature had driven them away. Some suggested a meteor impact, a sudden burst of radiation, or even toxic gases from beneath the permafrost. But no evidence of that was ever found. The ground was solid, the sky was clear, and the land bore no scars. Then came whispers of something stranger. Hunters who passed through the area that same winter spoke of blue lights in the sky, glowing orbs that drifted slowly above the horizon. Some said they pulsed like a heartbeat. Others described a low hum that vibrated through the snow itself. Local elders said those lights had been seen before, for generations. They were said to be the spirits of the sky, ancient beings that came down to take souls back to the stars. The elders called Lake Anjikuni a thin place, a sacred site where the veil between worlds was fragile and where people sometimes disappeared into the aurora. One guide who joined the Mounties' search was later quoted as saying, "They did not run, they were called." Others began connecting the strange lights to stories of sky visitors, the ones who arrived from above, taking entire groups without a sound. These tales had been told by northern tribes for centuries, stories that predated airplanes, satellites, or electricity. In later decades, when reports of unidentified flying objects spread across the world, many would point back to this place, suggesting that Lake Anjikuni might have been one of the earliest cases of mass disappearance linked to the unknown. Still, not everyone believed in the supernatural. Some blamed human secrecy, covert operations, hidden experiments, or government testing in Canada's remote wilderness. But official records never supported those claims. Whatever the truth, the more people searched, the more questions they found. The graves, the frozen dogs, the missing footprints, the flickering blue light, each detail felt like a piece of a puzzle that refused to fit together. As one investigator later wrote in his journal, "It is as if they stepped off the face of the earth and were erased from memory itself." And perhaps that's exactly what happened. Something erased them. Not with violence, not with fire, but with silence.
The mystery of Lake Anjikuni was never solved. No remains were ever found. No new clues, no evidence, no explanations. All that's left now are the stories whispered around fires, told by travelers, and passed down by those who still live near the frozen lake. Over the years, investigators, journalists, and storytellers have tried to uncover what really happened here. Each time, they come away with more questions than answers. Some say the villagers were simply lost to the elements taken by hunger, cold, or exhaustion. But even the most experienced Arctic explorers say that explanation doesn't fit. The Inuit were masters of survival. They would never have left food, tools, and shelter behind. They would never have left their dogs tied to die in the snow. Others believe something far stranger happened, something beyond what science can explain. That on that winter night in 1930, the people of Anjikuni followed a sound, or a light, or a calling that led them away from this world forever. Local elders still speak softly about that night. They say that when the air is still and the moon is hidden, you can hear the faint echo of voices carried on the Arctic wind. Laughter, footsteps, a baby's cry, and sometimes the soft hum of something vast moving high above the clouds. For some, these are only stories. For others, they are memories. Every few years, travelers pass near the old settlement site and report the same strange things. Their compasses spin. Their radios fall silent. They see blue lights hovering over the frozen lake, silent, bright, and pulsing, just like the ones Joe Labelle described nearly a century ago. One explorer in the 1970s wrote in his journal, "It felt as if the world itself was holding its breath. I heard voices not from far away, but all around me." He never returned to Lake Anjikuni again. Maybe the people of the village weren't lost at all. Maybe they crossed over into a place the rest of us can't see, a place where the sky meets the ice and time stands still. Because there are still places on this earth that hold their secrets close, where the wind whispers to the stars and the snow covers what should never be found. And if you ever find yourself standing at the edge of Lake Anjikuni, beneath the northern lights, listen closely. You might just hear the faintest echo of voice calling out from the past, a reminder that not all who vanish are truly gone.